Hello, beautiful people. Welcome to the Courage to Change Your Recovery podcast. My name is Ashley Loeb Blassingame, and I am your host. Today, we have Ashley Morgan. Ashley Morgan is an interior designer based in Los Angeles, California, who has had a very tumultuous journey to find her recovery, to say the least. Ashley moved around Europe and Asia a lot as a child, following her father's career in finance until she landed back in LA, where she spent the majority of her childhood. She found drugs and alcohol at a very young age, only to discover that her illness would progress quickly. After being in and out of 13 different treatment centers and hospitals, Ashley finally came to the realization that she wanted to live. And the only way to do that was by a complete lifestyle change, and most importantly, being completely honest with herself. Ashley now has the privilege of owning a business and has worked hard to repair relationships with her family and friends over the years. As you'll hear in her story, an integral part of her getting and staying sober has been working the steps along with the incredible support system she has surrounding her. All right, episode 38, let's do this. Ashley, welcome to my podcast booth.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. So fun. Are you totally nervous?
I wasn't, and then all of a sudden I just got super nervous because you're looking at me weird.
Okay. Sorry, I won't look at you. I'll stare at the phone.
Once I start talking.
Okay.
It'll
So, Ashley, you are here. You are one of my best friends in the whole wide world, and I love you, and thank you for being here.
Yeah, of course. This is so exciting.
I know. The booth, this is our booth.
I love it. It's very cozy in here.
Yeah.
Like I want to take a nap.
Yeah. Well, not yet.
I just always want to take a nap.
Yeah, always
everywhere.
just to, like generally
what I want to
generally want to take a nap.
Always tired.
So, okay, how long are you sober?
12 and a half years.
Wait, what?
Yeah. August 4th, 2007. So, oh my God. Just at 12 and a half, which is so weird, isn't it?
How old were you when you got sober?
A week before my 19th birthday.
Before your 19th birthday?
I spent my 19th birthday in a treatment center in Santa Fe, New Mexico. Not thrilled.
I spent 17, 18. 17.
I mean, I spent a lot of other years too, but the last final one.
I'm trying to think of treatment birthdays.
It was exactly.
Did they give you like one of those like really botched cakes?
No.
Oh no, there was no cakes.
No, there was no cakes. I was 7 days sober, so I got sober exactly a week before my birthday, and I woke up being like, "Hey, I'm ready to go home now," and they're like, "Yeah, no, that's not a thing," which was a total pattern in my using and in my trying to get sober, specifically this last time where I would make a mess and then try and clean it up for like a day or two, right?
Right.
You know, my poor father would pay for this like 30-day treatment, and after sleeping it off for a few days and them giving me medication to detox, I'd wake up and be like, "Well, I'm okay. I'm gonna go." And they're like, "Yeah, no, that's not a thing. Like, this is a 30-day program." And I'm like, "No, it's cool. Keep the money. We're good." And mind you, it's not my money. It's a lot of money, and it happened numerous times.
Yeah.
So, you know, I think that last time I think it was good that there was a birthday there. Just like, I remember that.
Yeah, you were right.
I remember it. And I mean, I still have friends from that place that I talk to regularly. And I think if it wasn't for them, you know, a rehab relationship is like, you know, you can be best friends within 2 hours and it feels like you've known somebody for years when really you met them a week ago. So I think that's what kind of kept me there for a little bit.
Yeah. It's like those are life-changing bonds.
100%.
So where did you grow up?
I grew up in LA. My mom is from LA.
Where in LA?
Like Hancock Park.
Okay.
And my dad was an Army brat and then kind of ended up in San Diego as a teenager.
Okay.
And then grew up there. And I was not born in LA. I was born in New York, but that's because my parents were both living there when I was born. And then we moved like all over Europe and Asia, and then came back to my dad's job. He was in finance, so we kind of kept bouncing around and then moved back to LA.
How old were you when you moved back?
I think it was 3. because 6 months later, my sister was born.
Okay.
And I'm 3.5 years older than she is. And when at some point in those travels, we lived in France and I spoke French. And so they put me in a French school in LA because they didn't want me to lose the language. And also it was one of those schools that have campuses all over the world. And if we, God forbid, we had to move again,
Right.
it's the same curriculum. So like I could on Monday leave LA and Tuesday go to school in London and it would be all the same thing. So we didn't end up moving again. My parents divorced shortly after my sister was born.
So you were like 4?
I was 4, yeah.
When they And do you remember?
It's so funny. Yes and no. I remember fighting. I remember and then I remember my dad, right after they divorced, I think they had bought a house here, like in Studio City, or like Toluca Lake. And, cause my grandparents had bought a house in Toluca Lake, which is like kind of by Universal City. My grandparents lived there, so we bought a house there, and then they divorced, and my mom moved into like a condo nearby, and then my dad got an apartment, and my dad, right at that time, took a job in New York again. So he moved back to New York. But
when you were 4?
Yeah, but he came back, I think around that, right around
ish.
And then he would come back every other weekend to have his weekends with us. So, and then it went like that. What I do know is that for many, 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 many years after they divorced, it was a fight. And there was a horrible custody battle for until the point where I must have been 16 or 17, they were still fighting over my sister. But at that point I had made such a mess and I was heavily into my addiction. And I think it says somewhere in court papers, like, forget about Ashley. We don't even need to worry about her anymore. Like I was like they had written me off. They like didn't want to deal with it.
God.
So yeah, a lot of fighting, a lot of chaos, a lot of,
So you are 4, they divorce. Are you at the French school? How long did you stay at the French school?
From kindergarten to the beginning of 8th grade.
So you speak,
after 7th grade.
French fluently?
Yeah.
And then at that time, so the fighting that you remember, the custody battle, what after, like in your early years, like when you were like 7, 8, 9, 10, around and those times, like what did the custody battle look like? I
think because my dad had moved away, like was primarily living in New York. And like I said, it's a lot to come back every other weekend. That's like, now as an adult, I see the dedication that takes. But at the time I was very confused. And, my dad is if he ever hears this, I don't want to, we have a much better relationship now. So I think I would, but I think growing up, I saw him as, his father was in the military, so there was this very kind of strictness there, and not one to talk about feelings, not one to ask us how we're feeling, and not because he didn't care, but he just, now I see it as he didn't know how to do that, but kind of a more, much more reserved person, very strict. There were consequences for everything. And then there was my mom who was like this, like very kind of social, very loud, a lot of oversharing. And so I think I didn't realize it, but at the time, she made me her best friend, right? I'm the oldest of 2. And instead of being like the mother that wants to protect the kids from, my sister was, I think, a bit more sheltered by it, like from it. I don't know that, it showed up in her life also, but we just had a different relationship with her. Yeah. And I became kind of the best friend, and which, obviously forces you to grow up really quickly. And things were being shared with me that probably shouldn't have been shared about details about what happens in court. And I do remember them making us go to a therapist, and for years we had to go to therapists, and it was the time, and I'm sure we'll get to that, but I went until it was before I started using.
Okay.
Because in the beginning, I guess to answer your question, it was like shared custody, right? Everything was, and then over time they started using us as like a pawn, right? And so the
what does that look like?
Like the physical and legal custody would constantly change, whoever won in court at that time. So, it started with my mom would get the majority, physical custody. I think they always had 50-50 legal. And then my mom would be erratic and do crazy things. My dad would take her back to court. And then he, at some point, I can't remember what age, got 100% or a majority percent custody of us, physical and legal. And there were periods where we were going back and forth every other day from each other's houses. And we always had nannies who picked us up from school. And it's a lot for a kid now thinking about it. You have to like bring your clothes with you to school, right? So you have an extra bag, you have a backpack, and then you have like a clothes bag to go spend the night at whatever parent's house. And part of it was fine. I played sports and I was, very busy, but it was definitely very chaotic, very hectic. And, anytime my dad would do something to my mom that she didn't like, she would share it with us. And, now as an adult, my mom ultimately ended up being diagnosed with like mental illness. And at the time I didn't know that. And there was always like kind of something off, but she was like a socialite and, looked like a Barbie doll. And so she hid it for a long time.
She was a very accomplished interior designer, right?
Yeah.
In the LA area.
But that didn't happen till later.
Okay.
I think she was more around when we were younger.
And what is like, now we know it was mental illness. What did her mental illness look like then that you didn't know that's what it was?
That's a really good question. I guess I haven't stopped to think about that. I'm not a doctor,
Yeah.
but I feel like there was a lot of like narcissistic personality disorder traits, everything happening to her all the time. And, lots of really close relationships and then big fallouts a lot, right? So there was not a lot of stability. There was not a lot of, if she had an emotion, she was sharing it with us. Or taking it out on us.
Okay. And then like, what were you like, oh, my mom just has a lot going on. Like, what did you think of her?
I don't know. I think I enjoyed the role of best friend for a long time until it started backfiring on me, until I was a teenager and, started using. And then she all of a sudden tried to be a parent again. And I was like, wait a second, what? But my dad was very controlling in his own way. My dad was very militant. He was very, again, never spoke about feelings.
Right.
None of that. Very, didn't really speak about much, actually. Always was wondering what he was thinking. Like one of those that was always quiet, never overshared about custody stuff. Always, I joke that when he gave me the sex talk, he came in, he had read a book about how to have, it literally was called like how to have this talk with your kids, and took notes on his yellow legal pad and came into my room one night and was like, we have to talk, and proceeded to talk to me about sex. And I was like, I still remember where I was sitting. And now anytime I see everyone who knows, like I see a yellow legal pad, I'm like, oh no, somebody's having a talk with me. Like I'm scarred by these legal pads because everything, but he was methodical and well thought out. I like to joke with him that like, you ask him what the color of the sky is and he'll tell you I have to sleep on it and get back to you. Like he doesn't my mom just would say whatever was going on. And my dad was definitely much more well thought out, much more logical. And then if he made a decision about something, that was it because he had thought it through. Right. Whereas my mom was so erratic, always acting on emotion. So it was just this kind of like,
polar
going
opposite.
back, completely going back and forth from these two situations on a regular basis. You're just like, you don't know how to be, I guess.
Did you and your sister commiserate over, like, did it bond you? Like, did it bond you? I would think it would bond you.
If you ask her now, I think we had completely different experiences.
Yeah,
the other thing I need to note is I don't remember the majority of my childhood, like pre all of that. Like there was a huge blockage.
Normal for trauma.
Yeah. And there's times where I call her and I'm like, hey, I just had this memory. Is this real or not? And she does the same thing with me. Like, I don't know. And also the way I remembered things, obviously when they're explained back to me, whether from an adult that knew me at the time or whatever, was completely different. Like, I remember being very in my head and very, the head being very loud. But I also remember myself kind of like only internalizing that. And as much as I was social, but I was like the most talkative person. Every report card was like smart, talkative in all, uppercase red letters, like would get sent out of class every single day. Like, and I remember that, but I also remember the inner dialogue and somehow in my memories that wins, right? So I tell my, if I don't correct myself, I'm like, oh, I was just this like quiet overthinking kid, which I was an overthinking kid. I was just super loud on top of it. So it was like chaos. And then my sister was much more emotional than I was, much more outwardly emotional. So she was a huge crier. She was very much better about talking about how she was feeling.
Not you.
No, I was like Fort Knox for me. And because I didn't trust that my feelings would either be taken seriously or that they mattered and this is not anything that I knew in the moment, but being able to look back on it, and some of what I'm saying right now is literally coming to me in the moment, but no, there was no room for it. I felt like, they were so busy fighting each other that there was no room to have a feeling about it.
Did you think to yourself, they're fighting to, like, or at least in the beginning, like, oh, they're fighting to spend time with us? Like, how is, for kids who go through, and, I'm grateful I haven't been through this, kids who go through custody battles, like, right. You're fighting, like, I picture like you're fighting for your kid, right?
Totally.
But like, that's not the experience for the kid, right?
No. And I think, or as
what
much
do they
as,
think?
being an adult gives you a different perspective,
Totally.
right? And, life is really hard. And then to have kids and then be going through a divorce and then
right.
fighting with the kids. But I said this, I figured, I feel like this thought came to me at some point in sobriety that, like, they just wanted to fight more than they loved us. That doesn't mean they didn't love us.
Right.
They were just kind of almost addicted to the fighting and the winning of that.
Right.
And in my case, money equaled power. And so they were constantly fighting. I remember my dad being like, your mom traded you in for a car. Like, she wanted a new car, and my dad was like, give me more custody. And at one point she was like, okay. Yeah. Does that mean she traded us in for a car? No, but
as a
these are the
kid.
kinds of things that you hear, and you're like, okay, well, that, And I think there was an insane amount of suppression. Like, it just was all too much, you know? And the other thing I learned in my family was just make it look good, no matter what is going on. I come from a country club background and on my mom's side, and old Southern background on my dad's side. Like, there was not, no one was running around telling everyone how they felt. It just wasn't a thing.
And that's the other thing. Like, you grew up, having all the things and what, the, like, on paper, like, looked really good. And you grew up with all the LA, right. celebrity kids and right. elite kids. But, like, were you aware of that? And what did you think about those types of, like, were you like, oh, I mean, I don't know if any of were the celebrity kids celebrities at the time? No.
The celebrity that are celebrities now, yeah. And the parents, some of them, yeah.
Yeah. Like, what did you think is it, like, oh, this is, like,
it was normal.
It was just normal, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it was normal to have all these people around, or, like, people coming to pick me up from school. Like, and no one else thought it was weird either.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
it wasn't like this friend of my mom's who was a very famous person coming to pick me up. No one, like, batted an eye.
Right,
it wasn't,
right. It was just
it wasn't like people were freaking out, like, oh, this is such a, unique experience, because it was happening with them too. So yeah, I don't really, but my dad was really against it. My dad hated it. My dad hated LA, hated everything it kind of stood for.
So he was talking to you about the fact that this was a thing.
Yeah.
So you got perspective that this wasn't how it was with everyone, because...
Yeah.
Or no?
Yeah, yes.
Because he told you.
But it just seemed like his, kind of intense views, because everything was an intense view, Right. So I just kind of filed that away as, like, I don't know, just the rigidity
relevant.
of him. Yeah. He was a very... I will give him credit. The older he gets, the more he calms down. So I can get into that later. I don't want to make him sound like this, like,
Yeah.
But that was my upbringing.
Yeah.
But I will say he absolutely wanted the best for us.
Yeah.
And, was the most hands-on dad you could be, with, being the CFO of a company and still coaching both of our soccer teams and, showing up for swim team and, all of these things. Like, he was, and that's how he was raised, is like, you excel academically, you do extracurricular activities, you have a lot of structure. And he was just doing
what he knew.
And I think that his father passed away when he was 10. And his father was Navy. He was a fighter pilot. And apparently he was not a nice guy. He was like, apparently there was alcoholism there. There was a lot of rage. And it took me years into sobriety to realize that he didn't know how to be a dad, because he didn't have one. And the one that he did have was a terrible example, you know? And I think it gave me some compassion and some sympathy for that. And it allowed me to some of the anger to dissipate,
right?
Because I had a mother who, showed every emotion. And when she was happy with you, you just felt like you were the center of the universe.
Right.
And when she was upset with you, watch out,
Right.
A lot of rage, a lot of, and misplaced, right? Mad at my dad, takes it out on us, which is, not a unique story in any way, but it was very prevalent in our upbringing.
When were you introduced to substances?
I remember I have an aunt. So my mom's like the second oldest of 6.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. 3 boys and 3 girls. And then her youngest sibling, they're the same age difference apart. as the youngest sibling and I are apart, which is 12 years. So she was 12 when I was born. So she was like my friend and my, still.
This is your aunt was 12 when you were born.
And I remember she graduated from college. She was in school in Oregon, and we went to the graduation. And I have just remember it was like in this open air barn. It was like, very kind of hipster cool now. And I remember being really thirsty because I'd been running around. I think I was in 5th or 6th grade. And I saw this cup and I was like, oh, there's Sprite in here. And I took this giant drink, and somewhere in there, I knew it wasn't Sprite, yet I continued to drink it, right? And it's obviously tastes disgusting. And I remember having a really fun night, and then nothing for a long time. And then, it's a long story, but at the end of 7th grade, my dad sat us down. And at this point, he had full custody, majority. Like we saw her maybe once or twice a week.
Was he back from New York?
Yeah, he had moved back.
He came back.
I don't know. A few years after that.
And mom's stability was waning.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah. She was now looking at it, it was already deteriorating, but it would take another decade for it to actually.
Yeah.
And then another 5 years after that, maybe 10, I don't know, 5, 7 years after that for anything to happen. So it was a long process. But yes, it was starting to kind of come apart. And so my dad, I guess, accepted this position in Seattle towards the end of my 7th grade year. And he had gotten remarried at this point, and sat my sister and I down and said, listen, I'm taking this job. So we're moving to Seattle. Do you have a choice? Do you want to come with us, or do you want to stay with your mom and you'll stay in your school? And of course, my sister and I were like, we're going to stay. Why would we want to do something so drastic? We're going to stay. And apparently that was not the right answer.
Oops. Because
we went anyway. And it was moments like that where I felt tricked a lot. Yeah. Oh yeah. I guess it wasn't even up for discussion. I don't know why they even sat us down. It was that false sense of I have a choice in this, and that happened a lot in my.
Where they asked you and then did it.
Oh yeah. Or something was talked about and, the decision had already been made, or we didn't have a say in it. And so we ended up moving to Seattle at the end of my 7th grade year. And, being a teenager already is so brutal. I wouldn't wish it on anyone. And then you add in moving to another state, to a different climate even, and having to meet all these new people. And so we moved up there. Immediately I hated it. I mean, I'm from LA where it's like sunny most of the time, and, it rained every day, and it was depressing. And as much as I didn't necessarily have trouble making friends, I think that thing about, where I grew up and how I grew up was very different.
Right.
We lived on an island up there that, the celebrity up there is like, my next door neighbor was like Paul Allen, or, every Starbucks VP lived on this island, every Microsoft VP. So it was just a different kind of situation. And so people are like, oh, you're from LA. Do you know this? Do you know that? And I would just answer honestly, because I came from a situation where that wasn't weird. And then everyone was like, oh, that's cool. And then the next day you're labeled like a liar, And it just happened so quick. And I was like, wait, what? You just asked me a question. I just answered it honestly.
Yeah.
And so it was weird. It was just a weird thing. Yeah. And then I think that Christmas break, there was a lot of manipulation. I learned how to manipulate early on. And my mom really fell for it. My dad never did. But we were telling I was telling my mom how unhappy I was. And I don't know the details of this, so I don't want to speak to it too much. But what ultimately ended up happening is my mom lied on a police report, and she got full custody. So we ended up coming down. We were going to spend a week with my mom over break, and we never went back. And I do remember a conversation. I don't remember any of this. I guess I wrote something out. I wrote like a,
statement.
I wrote a statement. I signed it. Or maybe my mom, I don't know. I truly don't remember. And there was no drugs or alcohol yet. And I remember my dad saying to me, you've made your choice. I'll never forgive you for this. Mm. And then we lived with my mom, and my school, I had already kind of started getting in trouble in school, ditching, obviously that, talkativeness it only got worse. It didn't get better. Super disruptive. So this small private school that we were in ultimately ended up saying, sorry, we gave away your place, which maybe they could have made room, but they were not,
that happened to me
interested.
As well.
Yeah. And so we went to public school for the first time in our lives. And that is where the using really, really began. I mean, almost immediately. So because I grew up here, we were members of a beach club, had a lot of friends, and some of those friends ended up going to this middle school. So luckily it was kind of a soft landing, right?
Yeah.
It wasn't.
Yeah.
And they were, smoking weed. And I think within the first few days, I smoked weed for the first time. And I remember not liking it. And then the next day being like, I can't wait to do that again. And I did for weed was a part of my story for 2 years, 3 years, every day. And then within a week, I found my people pretty quickly, I guess I'll say. Within a week, I had this friend who will remain nameless, who showed me harder drugs. And it was basically speed.
And how old were you?
I was in 8th grade, so 13, I guess.
Yeah.
And then that was it. I found this friend had secretly given me these pills. So it wasn't like, maybe he saw something in me that I would appreciate these. And I didn't tell a single soul. I would smoke weed with everyone. Sometimes we would drink. I would do hallucinogens, but these pills were my lifeline. I felt like I could cope. And, at this point, the chaos at my mom's house, it was fighting all the time. My mom didn't know how to handle us. And this is where that, being the best friend backfired, because, she would try and reprimand me and I'd be like, who are you? Like, I'm sorry. And her response to that was to call the police. When she couldn't parent us, she would just call the cops. It was me mostly. She never called the cops on my sister.
And call the cops and say what?
My daughter's being, a disaster. It started out with more the truth. And then over time.
What did the cops do?
They would come over. They would come. I mean, we're, a white family in the Palisades. My mother was very dramatic and knew how to say what she needed to say to do it. And then to get whatever she needed. What? Most of the time they would come over and be like, be nice to your mom.
Okay.
Yeah. But it was a recurring thing. To the point where I remember being in the kind of village near my high school with friends after school one day, and there were these cops, and they knew me by name, and they were like, "Have a good day. Hope nice to see you, Ashley." And somebody was like, "Is your mom dating that guy?" And I was like, "No, you don't understand." Like it was so. She
called the cops regularly.
And they were like they were like my second parent. Like
when the cops get home, you're going to be in so much
100%.
trouble.
100%. When she would
call them, what was your when she was like, "That's it, I'm calling the cops," right?
She'd be like, "My daughter's being truly don't fully remember because I was intoxicated all the time." Like that other girl said, like it was from the second I started, I knew that this was something that I was going to do forever. And that I needed to cope with each and every day. And so I just didn't want anyone taking that away from me. Yeah. I was so used to telling a secret of mine and then having it blow up in my face and my family. So I really I protected that with everything that I had. That I had these tools. These became my tools for living, right? And she was incredibly controlling, but she also worked all the time at this point and had a new baby. So
So had she gotten married?
No, she was engaged, and my stepdad ended up passing away.
Back up.
Yeah. I ended up finding him during this period. Passed away. It was not a.
Wait. Okay. Who's the stepdad?
He was this guy that my mom had known for forever.
And they had a baby when you were.
They didn't have a baby. This is where it gets a little complicated. Okay. She got pregnant at one point and decided to keep the baby. My stepdad, who was in and out for a long, of our life, who was also an active alcoholic for a long time, and he was kind of. What I thought, I always thought that he would disappear. Turns out, as I got older, I found out my mom would kind of push him away a lot. He kind of came back around and was like, "I'm going to raise this baby with you." And the only times it was calm in my house was when he was around. It was crazy. And heavy drinker, full-blown alcoholic. So this was a period where he was back around and there was peace in my house. She wouldn't go crazy all the time. And then I think he was only home for a few weeks or something. And he went to bed one night, and the next day my mom called and asked where I was after school. And I said, "I'm on my way home." And I guess we had a live-in nanny.
How old
because I have, 14. Okay. 14. Yeah. We had a live-in nanny because my mom had a new baby and she was working full time. And my mom called me back and said, the housekeeper called and said that he hadn't come out of the room all day. Usually he would sleep till stay up late and then sleep till 10. I think he had just been back from Europe. So there was jet lag in the beginning. And she said he hasn't come out. It was 4:00. She said, "Can you hurry home? I'm scared." And I got home and I'm standing there. My mom wouldn't go in the room and she sent me in. And of course he had been dead since 5:00 that morning. And she I guess they were trying to, my mom was trying to sleep. The baby was in the room. He had this like portable DVD player. And my mom there was a chaise at the end of like a lounge thing at the end of her bed. And she made him go lay on that with his headphones on to not wake her or the baby to watch whatever movie he was watching. And so she got up, went to work. I never went to school ever. And for some reason that day I happened to go to school. And so the housekeeper the nanny thought it was weird that he hadn't come out. And it turns out he had a heart attack in the middle of the night or at
whatever time.
5 o'clock in the morning. And it was because it was a cocaine overdose basically. And he was like 36, I think, years old.
So you go in and
find him. Yeah. He's cold. He's white. And I don't know. I don't know that I ever processed that. I think for me, the biggest thing is I absolutely loved him. He was French, so we could like speak French and my mom would know. There was this like, I had someone on my team and she was calm when he was around.
Yeah.
And so I think to lose that was the biggest thing. And, that was just another thing to pile on. Yeah, None of this stuff made me an alcoholic. Yeah. It was another thing to pile on to the trauma, I guess, if that makes any sense. And not that I was aware of that in the moment, but that's what ended up happening.
And what was your mom's, did she?
My mom was dramatic and everything was about her. So I don't think she's been getting help for her mental, mental health stuff in the last few years, but there was never a time where you could say you did this and it hurt me. There was no room for it,
Yeah.
In that time, it was very much that this had happened to my mother and that there was never a question of like, how did this make you feel?
Right.
There truly was no room
I just
for
sent you in to the room to find. No. There was no. And then, so the baby.
And then it would turn into, as the story progressed with telling people, I found him, like that she found him.
Right.
So it was this kind of like,
Yeah. And your sister, this was London?
Yeah.
And how old was London?
I don't know, 6 months.
Okay.
And 10 months maybe? She was under a year.
And how did you feel about your mom having another baby?
I loved her. She's just my little angel.
Yeah.
She's going to college soon. She just got accepted to a bunch of colleges. It's so weird. But yeah, no, I was not. But my other sister, I was horrible to her. I mean, my mom was working all the time and, every night I would have parties at my house or I would take my mom's car in the middle of the night and we would go joyriding, heavily on drugs and not so much drinking at this point. I think I could count at this point on one hand the number of times I'd been drunk. It was easier to get drugs when and I went to a public school in a really rich area that was also a charter school. So they were busing kids in from other areas that brought all the drugs and we had the money and zero supervision. So it was this perfect, I think it's still, and I could be wrong, in the top 5 drug high schools of America. And it has been for like, decades and decades. Yeah. It might not be anymore, but I can't imagine that would have changed. So it was this perfect kind of everything collided for me perfectly, because I could get the things that I needed to get through a day.
Yeah.
And so I would always have these parties and my mom would always do this thing where and she would work all day and then go out at night, right? And come home. And we had a live-in, so she wasn't necessarily worried about the baby. And she would always call 30 minutes before she was coming home. It's like somewhere in her, she knew that something was going on at her house and just didn't want to deal with it. So she'd be like, I'm on my way home, be home in half an hour. And that was when I knew to like, everyone would just, scatter like cockroaches and leave and clean up the house. And then nothing was ever spoken about.
And then the nanny never said anything?
Mm-mm. Yeah. It's so crazy.
She's like, I don't want to get involved in that. Yeah. So when your mom was going out to these parties, was she like getting drunk or like when she was going out at night?
Well, and so this is something I should touch on that. At some point, so my grandfather passed away with 25 years of sobriety.
I didn't know that.
Have an uncle who I think is about 25 years now sober. And so my mom, I think I was maybe 7, decided that she had gone through a period she needed to get sober. Okay. So she got sober from the time I was 7 to the time I was 10.
Okay.
So I grew up...
AA sober?
AA sober. Like log cabin in the morning before school. Okay. All the fancy LA meetings. So I was never afraid of AA. And I immediately knew I was an alcoholic. Like from the first time I took a drug or drink, I knew, and I wasn't scared of it. I just always thought to myself, you just go to AA once
That
it gets bad enough.
Oh my God, that makes total sense.
Which as like a 13-year-old, you're not really supposed to have thoughts like that, you know? I mean, not supposed to, but like that's not a normal thought. So,
no, but that's a really interesting thing, because if you see these positive outcomes, like I never thought of it that way, but like if you see these positive outcomes, like I think, I always think of in terms of my kids, like they see mommy and daddy, they go to, program, they're sober, their life is good, they pulled it together. So like, and then they know what the description of alcoholism is, and then they feel like, oh, I'm an alcoholic, and then they, in their mind, as the alcoholic would do, they skip to the happy ending.
Totally.
So that makes sense.
Right, which we all know is not it's not normal. The happy ending, unfortunately, statistically is not normal.
No.
So then it turned into my mom started drinking again, and she was like, oh, I just went through a period of emotional drinking. You're like, okay. Do I think that might have been the case? Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
But yeah, she was incredibly social and incredibly, out every night. But I don't know if she's an alcoholic.
Yeah.
I think she has a lot of other ism stuff, which she would tell you herself at this point. But yeah, I don't know.
So when did your drinking start to, or when did I use drinking like generally, when were some of the things starting to like get really out of control for you?
Almost immediately within that first year. And, I started running away from home. And one time my dad called me, which is another reason why my mom would call the cops. And I got arrested at one point. I got arrested for assault and battery when I was like 14 or 15. And this day was so bad. I never went to school. My mom never made me go to school. But this day, she was leaving for work. She's like, where's your phone? Or she had to run out really quickly. She's like, where's your phone? I'm like, I don't know. I'm already high. I'm already like super intoxicated. And I just didn't care. When you're high, you just don't care. And she was getting really angry about this. And she's like, if you don't find your phone, I'm going to call the cops and tell them that you're truant. Now, mind you, she never cared that I went to school any other day. And a fight, we proceeded to get into a fight. She calls the cops, and I think, I'm doing a lot of uppers. And I think I walked by her and like was just frustrated with her and bopped her on the head, just like out of like frustration, just listening to can I say a bad word? Yeah. Just the shit that was coming out of her mouth. And then of course it was, oh my God, my daughter just hit me. Get over here right away.
Oh my God.
The cops come and they immediately put me in handcuffs. And of course my mom was like, the typical boy who cried wolf. And she was like, oh, wait, no. She's like, arrest her, get her out of here. And then they're like, okay. And they did. And she's like, no, wait, it's fine. And they're like, no, the laws changed in California for domestic violence. The state now presses charges. Yep. Right? So there was always this like, she would make these messes. And somehow, this was one of those times where she couldn't undo it. And the best part about that was she was filming a TV show in our house that day for work. And so I come out of our house in like
this is how reality TV started.
1,000,000%. Ugg boots and Juicy Couture, like a Juicy Couture sweatsuit in handcuffs. And the camera crew is across the street filming the front of the house for this show. And I'm like being like walked away in handcuffs. Like, so my life,
it's like a perfect depiction of how.
So ridiculous. Yeah. And then, they take me to jail far away. Everyone's always like, oh, it's in Sylmar. And I'm like, oh, I've been to jail there once. Like, I've never been back since. I don't know what's there. And then, of course, she scrambles to get me out, and then we just don't talk about it anymore. So, there were consequences. But on the flip side, like I was like doing drugs in the back of the classroom with like the other kids, and like the teachers knew, and no one, they're like, oh, Ashley's just being crazy again. There was also this thread of like always kind of getting away with it, but ultimately they ended up sending me to boarding school. They were going to send me following year to an all-girls Catholic boarding school, like up north. And this was, I don't know, February, March, something like that. I don't know, somewhere in there in the spring. And I couldn't even wait that long. I kept running away. And then my dad was like, nope, you're going to this other boarding school in Arizona for bad, like a college prep school for bad kids. And they put me on a plane that night. I didn't even have time to go home and get my stuff. My mom met us at the airport. And that was the first time where I was like, wow, I need to clean up my act a little bit. I was like, this will be good. I'll go to a place where I don't have access to anything. Right. And then within an hour, my dad literally pulled the car up to the school, went in, wrote the check to the headmaster, and like left. Didn't even say goodbye. He was like, so over it. He was like, take her. I want nothing to do with this. And within an hour, somebody's like, hey, do you want to go smoke a joint? And I was like, oh, Yes, of course I do. But that whole thing of like, okay, it's really, I'm going to clean my act up. It's going to be really good for me.
Like that thought came to you.
Yes. And that is where I learned to drink was there. And it was basically like going to college at 14 years old. And so I was drunk for like a year. And once again, people knew, no one really said anything, no one cared until things started to happen and I kept getting into severe trouble. And I knew enough to say, I was scared. I remember I had a friend who looked at me one day and he's like, wow, you're an alcoholic. And I was like, yeah, I know. Like he was trying to help me by giving me this information. And I was like, yes, so.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, he passed away like a year ago from an overdose, due to this disease. Like there was a bunch of us that were just like heavily active in our addictions at the time. And so I kept getting into trouble and I knew to be like, okay, I got to go to rehab now. Like I knew enough. My mom, to get like a fun job when she got sober, was the head chef, was the chef at Promises, right? Mm-hmm. So I grew up around, like none of it scared me, all of it was really so normalized. And so I was like, I'm going to go to rehab. So they sent me home. And I really, truly was hitting a bottom for sure. It wasn't fully a manipulation. Like I really was struggling and couldn't not drink every day. And so they were going to send me to Visions, which was like the adolescent promises.
Yeah.
And at some point, they ripped that check up and sent me to a place in Orange. And it was like, I think I was one of 3 kids that weren't court ordered there. You could smoke there in those days. Mm-hmm. My mom wouldn't. That was one of those things. My mom was such a pushover, but every once in a while, she would like hold to something. And it was like she wouldn't sign the waiver for me to be able to smoke cigarettes. And I'm like, what are you doing? Yeah. What are you doing, lady? So I'd go in the back. I'd go in the back of the building and sneak cigarettes, and I ended up like burning the next door neighbor's shed in the backyard down. Like just crazy. Somehow got away with that. I have gone back since and made my amends to them. And that started another kind of manipulation for me. I didn't want to be there. It wasn't cushy. It wasn't cozy. I felt like everyone was mean to me, mainly probably because they were just calling me out, but I was just not about it. And so I like started working on my mom to manipulate my way out of there. And I was like, I'll go to meetings, I'll get a sponsor, I'll do all these things. And I did. I came home. I wasn't even allowed at my mom's house. I was living at my grandparents' house, like in Pasadena at this point. And got a sponsor. And bless her heart, but the way she asked me to, guided me through the steps was not, I don't think anyone's advice on how to go through the steps. It was like, okay, just every day write down all the people you're mad at and what they did. That was it. So you're just walking around this like ball of anger. There was no anything else. And ultimately, I ended up drinking, right? And then it was into, a bunch of 5150s. My mom was checking me into psych hospitals. Yeah. So there was all this, that now the real consequences started piling up on each other. And just to kind of fast forward through a lot of this, I got sober and then I would relapse and then I would get sober again because consequences would get worse. Things would get worse. The progressiveness was very apparent in my story. And then would get sober again, get a new sponsor. And then maybe I would start to work the steps a little bit. And maybe I would get to a 4th step and then I would relapse. But on the flip side of that, my life always was getting better every time I got sober, right? It was getting bigger.
You had that experience.
Yes, my life was getting bigger and better. And part of it was I was getting too busy for AA. I was getting too busy for the thing that saved me. But the majority of this, I was still a minor. So I was still living in an abusive, chaotic household. And I was still having most of my decisions, made by someone that, I didn't trust. So there was like all this chaos always. I ended up, after a few relapses, my mom's friend ended up taking me in, who was sober a while. And
how old were you when that happened?
17, I think.
Okay.
And she's like, no, you're coming to live with me. Like, I couldn't stay sober at my mom's house. I wouldn't give myself the opportunity to because I just wanted to drown out all the craziness.
Yeah.
And so I went to go live with this friend of my mom's and thank God for her. She saved my life. And I was able to get friendships that I still have to this day. Right. And these people took me in and they just like surrounded me. And I went to meetings every day and I got a get well job. Right. And things were going well. Things were moving in the right direction. And I had a boyfriend and who was also sober. And then it was right before I had a year sober. And my mom was also spending a lot of time in Orange County at one of my godmother's houses, right? So she was gone a lot. So then I started to kind of like live at my mom's house without her there. Everything was fine. No one was really fighting. And my mom calls and says that my sister was in a car accident. Or I think I was spending the night at my mom's house. while my mom was there. And my sister had stolen my mom's car. She tried to take mine, but she couldn't turn it on. Yeah, Campbell. I think it had a kill switch on it or something. And so she took my mom's car and proceeded to get into numerous car accidents with parked cars and then crashed into a palm tree and was MIA, was missing. And it took us...
the scene?
Yeah. It took us 12 hours to find her. And by the time we did... No, I mean, the cops basically said she walked away from this, obviously, but the internal bleeding, because she was drinking... She might not know, but she's probably dead in an alley somewhere because, you can't really survive a crash like this. I mean, the car, you couldn't even make out the car. And so we looked for her for a long time. The whole city of LA was looking for her. And this was really before heavy social media. So, there was a lot of calling around and she had left the scene, went somewhere else, then ended up taking a bottle of Tylenol and not telling anyone about it. And so by the time and then went to a friend's house and got in touch with my grandma. My grandma brought her back and she had had a few suicide attempts before that with Tylenol or Advil or whatever, which can do severe damage to you.
Not a good way to kill yourself though.
No, but she knew not to say anything about it. She knew to keep it quiet for a certain number of hours because within those, the beginning time, they can give you something to make it better. And so we didn't find out about that for a long time. And it was just this, she was in the hospital I think she was at UCLA for a month. And in the ICU for the beginning part, her liver failed. She basically said, if you give me a new liver, I'll kill myself. It was just a very, God.
So she
flatlined too. She flatlined. And I don't remember for how many minutes, but she flatlined.
From the attempt or from the car accident?
From the attempt, from the pills.
The pills.
I don't think that the car accident helped anything.
Yeah.
But her organs were shutting down and she refused, not that they're going to listen to a 14-year-old kid, but there's hundreds of thousands of people that are not waiting every day by the phone for a healthy organ. They're not going to give it to some ungrateful kid, right? So the reason I'm telling this story is I think I was just before a year sober. And my girlfriend flew out from New York and I looked at her at some point and I said, I think I need some cocaine to stay awake for my family. And the scary part is I really believed what I was saying. Yeah. I really, truly believed that was my reasoning behind it. Not this is too heavy for me, I can't deal with it. And so I did, and I got that cocaine, and I had a bout with it before. This was on a whole nother level. And the difference with this is I wouldn't drink.
Oh.
I wouldn't drink. And I remember...
That's unusual.
Yeah, because I didn't want to get sloppy. I lived with my sober boyfriend at this point.
Okay.
My world was sobriety.
Right.
And so I just didn't want anyone to find out.
Okay, you were still...
Yeah, I was a big liar. I was a big hider of my substance abuse and all that because I was so scared that they were going to take my solution away because that's what had always happened is they would find out and put me in a treatment center, put me here, put me there, and take away the only thing that was making me feel better, Yeah. So I kept it to myself. Everyone, I think, started to figure out very quickly because doing cocaine alone all day, every day, just cocaine and not drinking to kind of balance it. I was a psychopath and I weighed 82 pounds and I'm 5'9", so it's I was bruised all over my body. And then I remember I was going to go somewhere with my mom one night and she looked at me in the car and she said, I just want you to know, I know. I know you're not sober anymore. And we went to a bar and I took a drink.
Yeah.
And I had also turned 18 at this point. So at this point, no one really could put me anywhere.
Yeah.
Right. Against my will anyway. Mm-hmm. And that, it took me.
I so relate to that.
Yeah.
My 18th birthday, the literal thought, because I was in treatment on my 18th birthday. And my literal thought was, but I was awarded the state of California. And my literal thought was, all right. But was I'm 18, they can't put me anywhere. That was my happiest.
100%.
And it's such a good feeling.
Yeah, it's such a good feeling. And I could drink now and I can maybe try and balance this out. By the end of that relapse, I was drinking 2 liters of vodka a day. And 2 8 balls of cocaine a day. And that was just to maintain, right? And it was a very isolating. I didn't really want to be around other people. But over time, the boyfriend found out, that fell apart. And then I started meeting people that were doing what I was doing. Yeah. Through one way or another, And I had people to do this with. But I was the person that would go to a party where everyone was doing cocaine and I would take my own cocaine and do it in the bathroom as well as their cocaine. Right. I liked the isolation of it.
The secret.
I was basically living in my car I mean, it was a nice car, but I was basically living in it, or hotel room or whatever. I mean, it was just I relate to people who say it was a full-time job. I was not one that's like, okay, my career comes first. And then,
totally.
There was no career. There was no anything. Totally. There was none of that.
Yeah.
At all. Nor did I want there to be. Like, that's just what I wanted to do. And, and then it started to get bad and worse and worse and worse. At first, it was like, this is what I'm dedicating my life to. I'm fine with it. And then it started to scare me a bit, because that thing that I said about always being able to go to AA when it got bad enough, I physically couldn't go.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, tomorrow I'm going to go to a meeting. Tomorrow I'm going to this is like not, I put myself in very dangerous situations with very dangerous people, and some of which I probably don't even remember to this day,
sure.
And I just was starting to, kind of weigh on me. My mom used to come find me. I would be with friends in hotel rooms doing drugs for, numerous days. And my mom would come there and hang out, because she had said later that she didn't know if that was the last time she was going to see me alive. It was really, I was deteriorating, and I was not, my sister kind of had that, the suicidal ideation, suicidal tendencies. I'd never tried to take my own life, but I think I was...
Suicide on the installment plan.
Yeah, 100%. Like, I was like, if I don't wake up, I'm cool with
I'm good with that. Yeah,
like, totally. I was ready, but not willing to... Also, there was a vanity to it, like... What are these people going to do without me? Like, I was a disaster. I was like I wasn't allowed within 5 miles of any of my family members' homes. Like, I was a true train wreck, but I'm like, oh, they're going to miss me. You know what I mean? Like, this, like, that was the flip side of it. There was this vanity of like this, like, this, like, don't you know who I am kind of thing. And so I kept trying to get back. And then it got to the point where I was calling my dad and asking to go to rehab, go to detox. It was, the secret was out. Everyone knew at this point. And then that's when I would do that thing where he would put me into a treatment center, and then I would run away. And for a relationship that had no trust to begin with, that really wasn't helping the situation.
Yeah, right.
So but then he just stopped taking my calls. Like, every phone call cost him like $50,000, like with no return on his investment. So like, why would he even,
and he
now
was,
I don't blame
he
him.
had the legal pad out doing the math on that.
100%. He was not about it. And our mutual friend was someone that took me in. And I will always be grateful to him.
Yeah.
He was sober companioning at the time, and he took me in, and he called my dad and was like, your daughter's dying. And you need to know that. So then that started another series of detoxes, and that this friend of ours, facilitated.
Some real great stories.
Oh my God. Oh, I can't believe I'm to say this, but did you hear about the one where I peed on the sofa?
Yes.
In a blackout?
Yeah.
I thought I was going to take it to my grave. And
no.
Years later, he was like, why did you think you peeing on the sofa I wasn't going to notice? It smelled like pee in the house. Like, oh my God, so bad. But yeah, so this started this, and I guess I got a little more willing each time, but not enough to actually do anything. And so the last time, I remember I was at this, I don't know if it was an after hours, I was at this guy's house with a bunch of people that was known to have, his place was like the Coke place, right? And I'm in the bathroom doing Coke alone while everyone else out there is doing Coke. Like, it's just it was very isolating. And he calls me. It's like 2 a.m. I think he was like driving home, and he's like, I'm just checking on you. LW calls me. And for some reason I was like, I'm done. He's like, okay, come. You can go sleep in the spare bedroom or on the sofa, whatever. Just come here now. And I did. And I left there. And, he had to keep me drinking. Medically, he had to keep me drinking because I was having seizures if I didn't drink. But he would always take the cocaine away. So I would just immediately black out and do really, really weird things. And I woke up from this blackout. And there was a paper on the table, and it said it was a release form to go to a wilderness program in Utah. And I looked at him and I was like, huh? No, 100% no. It was like, when a puppy is like being trained and there's an alpha in the room and they bark and bark and bark until they calm down, and then they realize that that's the alpha and that they can chill. Yeah. That's exactly what I did to him. I was like, you're crazy, no way. And he just stared back at me. And I slowly, and the thought in my head was, you've tried everything else. Yeah. Why not? And so I signed it, and I went off to detox in Salt Lake City for like 10 days or something. And then they put me in this wilderness program for 9 weeks. And I fought that too in the beginning. I fought it, and I fought it, and I fought it, and I ran away. Yeah. Like, good luck running away in the middle of Mormon, Utah. Oh, yeah. I tried to hitchhike, which I've never done before in my entire life. And then I went back, and it was the first real willingness that I had. And I said to him, I was always like my dad called me on the satellite phone as I'm like huffing and puffing my way out of this, place, this like national forest. And he was like, turn around, go, but what are you doing? Mind you, there's like, because there's a safety net, there's a bunch of pickup trucks and all of the staff is like driving behind me. But I'm 18, so they can't actually like restrain me and bring me back. It was just ridiculous for anyone that was driving by.
Oh, yeah.
And I was like, well, maybe I have this problem, so I need to go to this treatment. And he finally said to me, finish one and I'll send you wherever you want to go. You can go, like, how about complete something, finish something, and I'll send you to every rehab you want to go to. But do this one first. And that resonated with me. Because I had never completed a single thing in my entire life.
Yeah.
So I did, and that was an incredible experience. Of course, it turned out to be an incredible experience. And I thought I was going to go home after, and then I started to get more and more scared as it got closer to me leaving. So they sent me to a sober living in not in Denver, and what's it called? In Boulder. And I think that was maybe a bit too much too quick, and I ended up relapsing. And then they sent me to the final treatment center that I went to where I spent my 19th birthday in Santa Fe, New Mexico. And I'm very, very, very grateful for that place. It was a secondary treatment center. So it wasn't just alcohol and drug addiction. It was like everyone's everything. An insane amount of trauma work.
Yeah.
And even there in the beginning, I was like holding on to that will, and holding on to.
It's hard not to when you get put in those situations.
100%.
Like, even if you want it, you feel like
it's being pushed on you.
It's default.
Yeah.
They have to help you undo that before, even if you want it.
100%. So but then they were going to kick me out, and not for drinking or using, but for doing something else stupid and not listening. And somebody said to me, they're like, you're going to die if you don't get honest, like, and I don't know why I heard this woman. She barely knew me. I wasn't there that long, but she just looked at me and was like, you're killing yourself. And for the first time, I didn't want to die,
Yeah.
And so I threw myself into it. It was like, 10 or 12 hours a day of like heavy trauma therapy. And then it came time for me to leave after a few months, and I came back to LA, and that friend of ours ended up sponsoring me. I was too scared. I didn't trust women. I had really bad trust issues with women. I had a bad experience with a woman sponsor.
Yeah.
It was gross. So, and I asked him to sponsor me because, I trusted him, and I felt he had my best interest. But he was in Japan or something at the time, and he was like, I called him, and I'm like, overwhelmed now, living back with my mom, who is still continuing to deteriorate. And my dad is mad because I left there. He was like, I don't know if he's out of the country or something, but couldn't get a hold of him. They're like, you have till 5:00 to leave here. And so I had to, my mom bought me a ticket back to LA. And
stay tuned to hear more in just a moment. Hi, it's Ashley, your beloved host. When I'm not hosting the Courage to Change a Recovery podcast, I'm running the recruiting department at Lion Rock Recovery. We are always looking for amazing licensed mental health counselors, along with various other sales and operations positions that pop up from time to time. The Lion Rock culture is one of collaboration, support, and flexibility. Our employees work from home offices all over the country, utilizing technology to connect to one another. We are always hiring. So if you want to have the best job ever, check out our open positions and apply at www.lionrockrecovery.com/about/careers. So I think that's a big thing for a lot of women and who come into the program. It definitely was for me, right. Which is why I gravitated so much to LW. I think it is like people don't understand, like it looks strange, right? Like an older gentleman helping this young girl. But like for me, I didn't trust women, and he was the person that I could hear the message through.
100%.
And like, I don't know why. And now all I work with is like, I have zero interest in having like a male sponsor, or any, like not at all. At the time, like when I was 19 or 20, when I met him, he was the only person like that I, honest to God, did not feel judged by.
1,000,000%.
And I could hear the message. Like he would say things. I remember he said to me, I said like, oh, well, I'll never forget this moment. Because I'm sure lots of people said this to me. He looked at me and he goes, we were having breakfast, and we always had these breakfasts, and he would have these like long silence.
Same.
And I was like,
Nick's
yeah,
on
yeah. And he would have this long. I would be like talking or whatever, and he had this long silence, and I'm like, what are you thinking? Why are you not talking? Like I'm just, and I said like, okay, well, when I'm a year and sober, when I'm 2 years sober or something, I said, and he goes, if you're a year sober. And I was like, what are you talking about? You don't think I'm going to make it to a year sober? Yeah. And he was like,
the audacity.
Yeah, like I was so, and I'm like, screw you.
Yeah.
I'm going to stay so, like, there were so.
But he also knew how to not react.
Oh, totally.
You know what I mean?
And I didn't react. Yeah. I was just like, oh yeah. Yeah, just watch. And like, there were lots of little things like that. And I think that like you hear the message, whatever that message is, you need to hear from the person you need to hear
Completely.
it. And it's okay, like whoever that is, because it'll change.
Right.
And for people listening, like it's really normal for women to come in not trusting women. Yeah. Like it is normal to come in. Like I think we were pretty much all this like, well, all my friends are guys.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like because
100%.
Yeah. And like
I couldn't find a woman friend anywhere in my life.
No. And so like that is completely normal and okay.
Yeah. I think that, he did a lot, like where, I think that I like to tell this. So I do want to say the only difference between this sobriety and any other sobriety is that I worked all 12 steps in a row, start to finish, without like cherry picking what I thought I needed, what I thought I could get away with not doing it. And he was the person for me to do that with, Obviously I had issues with trust, but also fear of getting honest because that never worked out well for me in my life. Right. There was always like, the thing of just tell us, it won't matter, you won't be in trouble. And then there was these severe consequences. Like, I want you to trust me. It's, please. Yeah. And then it just was a disaster.
Blew up in your face.
But for him, I kept like testing him almost. And I didn't get the reactions I was used to getting, and I didn't get the judgment. Yeah. If anything, I got like, oh, that's stupid. I did one way worse. And then I felt like an amateur, you know?
Totally.
So I remember doing my 4-step finally, right? And writing down, I think it was like 2 notebooks full of names.
Yep.
The poor guy listened to the whole entire thing.
Oh my God.
But whatever, I was obviously very angry and it was incredibly suppressed. But I remember there were secrets that I had in my life that I wasn't resentful about. So it was like, for me, like a loophole, like, oh, I don't have to put this down. I'm getting away with it.
Totally. I was like, I remember, so that is a really great point. I love that because I remember like, okay, write down all your resentments, like you get out all your dirty laundry. And I remember thinking to myself, like, my dirty laundry is not in my resentments.
Yeah, 100%. I'm just mad about these other things.
Yeah, like that's not the dirty laundry.
Not mad at myself.
Yeah.
But I remember there was, and maybe we'll go into it, but there was a situation. Oh, so I read my 5th step to him. This poor guy listened to it for I don't know how many, times we had to get together. And then he goes, and, meanwhile, I'm like patting myself on the back. I'm like, you got away with it. Your secrets are safe, Yeah. And he goes, okay, now sit down and write a list of all your secrets. And I was so mad that it's like he knew what was in my brain.
Yeah.
And I did, though. And I was mortified and, felt like this was going to be the end of our relationship. Like, well, here we go. We had this great relationship and he's really helping me and we're never going to talk again.
Why did you decide to do it anyway then?
Because I trusted him. And I
had
no other. Yeah. And I wanted what he had, which was peace of mind. And at least on the surface, looking like he wasn't walking around just in like in one constant anxiety attack, He was like comatose compared to what I was,
Yeah.
And so I did it, and then we continued through the steps, and I would like to share kind of what happened with that, if that's okay. I get to my 9th step, I'm starting to make amends to people, and my life is getting really big, right? I've started a company out of nowhere. I was planning on doing one thing. At some point, I moved back to Arizona to be with a guy.
Yeah.
Not recommended. And then I ended up back, and I had stayed sober through that process. And I think I had, 2+ years sober. And I'm doing life. And then all of a sudden, I'm on my way to do one thing and to get my license for this thing. And then this other thing comes up. And so I'm working and I'm like, I'm making money and I'm making.
As an interior designer.
No, but this was before that with the events.
Oh, yeah.
I started working for a catering company and all of a sudden I'm like doing my own events. Like one thing leads to another and I'm super busy and I'm supporting myself and I'm, moved back from Arizona with basically nothing, have no idea how I'm going to support myself and then just like make it happen, right?
Yeah.
And, that's not a pat on the back, but like you when you don't have another option, you do it.
No,
right?
I've seen you do it.
And so, and I'm working and making a lot of money and things are good. And I think this was the time, maybe it was after that relationship. I can't remember. There was a period where I just wasn't able. I remember sitting him down one day and I'm like, he knows I'm doing well. And I'm talking about how I can't hold on to money. No matter how much is coming in, it's just going back out again, right? And very matter-of-factly, very calmly, he just looks at me and he's like, well, yeah, that's because the money you're bringing in doesn't belong to you. You owe people money. Like, kind of like in a very sweet, loving way, but duh.
Yeah.
And I was like, I don't know about that. He's like, so maybe we look at, there was one very significant financial amends that I needed to make.
The shed in the back of the...
No. But I made that one. And I was so scared because the woman that worked there hated me. And she still worked there all those years later. I was like, she's calling the cops. 100%. But I did. I went down there and I made that amends. And then they asked me to come back and speak on a panel there, which was really great. But this was another one. I worked at this company, the last place I worked before my last relapse. And I took a lot of money from them. It was like nobody was really paying attention. And and it was supporting my habit, Yeah. And I was going to go to my grave with it because they could absolutely 100% put me in jail for it. And so he brings that one specifically up. He's like, maybe we think about, the biggest financial amends you have. Everything else was pretty self-contained with me. So I didn't it's not like I had child support to pay. I had children, like none of that stuff. And I was like, haha, that's cute. But anyway, I got to go buy.
How much money do you...
I had no idea.
Okay.
But I wasn't even willing to entertain it.
Okay.
And then over the course of the next 7 days, I run into 5 people that I worked with at that company. Hadn't seen them ever out before.
Yeah.
Have not seen them again to this day.
Yeah.
And I'm like, ugh. I just knew and I called him. It couldn't have been more obvious.
The universe
was like, we're doing this, So I call him and I'm like, okay, I hear you, fine, let's talk about this. And, and I had to make this call to the man who owned this business, who was just the nicest, kindest, had always been nothing but nice and kind and a family man, just a good guy. And I had to be willing to go to jail. And, I said this the other day that had it come down to it, whatever happened after that, if that was it, I don't know, where my willingness would have been, but I had to be willing to make the phone call to make it right. So I go to LW's house and I make it with him because I'm way too scared to make it by myself. And I call this man and I say, listen, this is what happened, and I took money from you and I want to pay it back. And he is quiet for a second. And the first thing he says is, I just want you to know that I see how hard this call must be to make. And already off to nice,
that
kind
makes me want to cry.
Totally.
Yeah.
And I'm like, huh?
Yeah. You're like, what?
And I was like, thank you.
Yeah.
And he goes, well, how much money do you think it was?
Yeah.
And I said, honestly, I have no idea. And he was like, okay.
Well, you think it was more than 10 grand?
Maybe it was about that.
Yeah. Okay.
And I said, I wrote all the... he goes, I want you to come up with a number and really try and think about it. And then I want you to give that money to somebody who needs it. And I was like, I'm looking at the phone away from my ear, I'm sorry, what? Did you just hit your head?
Yeah.
And I was like, okay. And, for my pattern was to run and to completely evade responsibility my entire life. So I could have absolutely hung up the phone and just been like, cool, that's taken care of.
Yeah, I was going to say, that would be so hard, especially in early sobriety. I would have been like, cool, so he said I don't have to pay it.
100%.
That's all I would have heard.
Yes, 1,000,000%. But I did. I wrote that check every single month. And I was about a month away from my, I think on my last check.
Did you send him, did you?
No, he didn't need to know anything.
I know, but I mean, you didn't tell him?
No.
Oh, I would have been like, see, I'm doing it.
Totally. But I think I even talked to LW about it. He's like, no, just do what he said.
Yeah.
And I was a month away and I run into him at Swingers on Beverly. I walk in and he's standing there with his son. And they're both dressed in all white, like little angels. You know what I mean? I felt like it was nighttime and there was still this light on him.
Yeah. He's glowing.
And he looks at me and he starts crying. There's tears in his eyes. And he comes and gives me the biggest hug. And he says, I want you to know, I tell your story to whoever will listen. And I told him, I said, I'm on my last check. And it's weird because I had just left talking to a newcomer at a rehab and told her this story. And I think she's with me, actually. The newcomer is with me to eat. Oh. And I have just told her the story that sounds like complete And then I run into the guy. It was just one of those moments in sobriety that you'll never forget, right?
And you try to explain to other people and they're like...
You can't get the significance of it, right? And I wrote that last check and something about that, I was able to hold on to money after that.
How interesting.
To be fair, I've also made amends to people in sobriety, like who are in the program, who are like, I don't care what you have to say. I want to see you anymore. You know what I mean?
Yeah, right.
Like that is not everyone. A typical amends story. Don't expect that.
Right. Let's not set our expectations.
But for me, that was like one of those things that more experience that if I show up, because I had never showed up for anything in my life, if I continue to show up and face the hard stuff, ultimately, no matter what happened with that phone call, my life is going to get better.
Right.
And I'm going to start to heal a little bit. And I don't have to take this stuff to my grave, because taking this stuff to my grave is what's killing me in the first place.
Right.
You know? And things started to get bigger and bigger and bigger. And I'm traveling the world. And you know, I was never here. And then I started to burn out.
And so at this time, so you're in your early 20s.
Oh, wait. So maybe I didn't start traveling yet. What I do want to touch on, I'm in my early 20s. Mm-hmm. I'm like, what I do know is around 4 years sober, my life started to fall apart. And I think now looking back on it, it was completely of my own making, where I was in a relationship that probably wasn't working for either one of us. I was not happy at work because I was also working other jobs, right?
Right.
So I'm like doing all this stuff. And one day I kind of blow my whole life up and I end that relationship. And you know, my friendships were attached to this relationship.
Right.
So because I'm the one breaking up the relationship,
you're the bad guy.
I'm the bad guy. And so all my friendships go away as well. And they were mostly male friendships. And yeah, I do want to say that from years 4 to 5, I never thought about drinking because I just knew where that led. I feel very fortunate to never forget how bad it was.
Yeah.
By the last time I got sober and that last day of drinking and using. But I kind of wanted to check myself into a hospital and have no responsibility for a minute, you know?
Totally. I do know.
Like just kind of
like
sit back and let somebody else deal with it. You know?
Yeah.
I wanted to not feel.
Yeah.
Right. And that doesn't mean I didn't want to end my life. I didn't want to, drink. I just wanted to numb.
Yeah.
And that is the first time, besides LW, who I did take direction from, that is the first time in my life I started talking to people that had been through the same things before me, who has gone, who went through a painful breakup in sobriety. I think I ran into, you and I talked at that point. Don't you remember that?
Yeah.
That was crazy for both of us.
So right, because LW, our mutual friend, he would always talk about the other Ashley, right? So he was like, oh, the other, because we would be going through things very similarly simultaneously, and I
feel like for our whole lives we did.
Yeah,
like we have such similar,
and then like with the breakup and things falling apart, and I feel so. One of my mentors told me that. Talked to me about, he's like, you have to, in order to stay sober a long time, you have to upgrade your recovery to where you are.
Yep.
And I did what worked in the beginning for a long time.
Right.
And then I'm a creature of habit. So I'm just going to do the same thing over and over and over and over and over and over again until it completely blows up in my face, right? It's just like, I don't know how to do anything else. Right. It doesn't occur
until somebody physically picks me up and turns me,
exactly.
to my left and is like, okay, keep walking this way now.
Like a little doll that goes in one direction. You have to turn me around. Yeah. And so around that same time, like when you're talking about that like bottom in sobriety is what you're talking about. I had to change my sobriety needed something new. Completely. And this has happened to me in other parts of my sobriety. It happened to me when I had kids, and it took me a while. It took me a lot of pain to come to that. Like, oh, this is a recovery thing again. Yeah, I'm like, I need a
it's happened
a
to
doctor. I need a neurologist. Yeah. I need
somebody come just lift this problem off my shoulders with me doing minimal effort.
I need I was like, I need every and it was like I need a psychic. I need anything just like maybe a plumber. I don't know, 100%. But then it's like, oh, this is a recovery. Yep. This is recovery. This is my alcoholism. Yep. And when I say alcoholism and when you say alcoholism, it just stands for all of the isms, all of the things that I use to numb because the feelings are too big and I just can't deal. And hitting a bottom in sobriety it was funny because I was literally talking today about the post that was like, I wouldn't trade my worst day in recovery for my best day using. And I was like, absolutely incorrect. Like absolutely unequivocally, my best day using was wonderful. And my worst days in recovery have been I
wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy.
Because I had to feel everything. ounce of it.
You're
like literally
as present as you can get.
Oh, you just, I mean, I remember thinking like, should I get the, the vegetable peeler and just peel my skin? I don't know what to do
100%.
here. Like I've been in a situation where I've been in the shower, like when Dak and I broke up, in the shower crying and like, I don't know where to walk.
Yep.
Like, yeah, it's just
the inability to
like, I don't know what to do.
Yeah.
Like not with my hands, not with my, like completely. I was so used to.
Well, that's the same time. You and Dak broke up around the same time.
Yeah.
So I remember running into you and both of us like just were like very skinny.
Very skinny.
Like you can see it in another person's eyes when their world is falling apart.
Oh.
You know what I mean? Like you just, you have that, like there no words have
like,
to be spoken.
I don't know what I'm doing.
I remember that conversation.
Yeah.
Very, like it was yesterday.
Oh, yeah. And that's an important, I think I suspect it happens to everyone. Right. I mean, I don't know anyone who hasn't hit a bottom in sobriety, but that is when.
I don't know that it's spoken about that much though.
Yeah, maybe not.
Right?
I mean, yeah, I don't know. I just don't.
Right.
I speak to a lot of people who tell me about it, so I don't know what I don't know what they tell people publicly, but they do tell me. But like a bottom in sobriety, those are the moments where you either grow, they say grow or go. Yep. Like you either grow or go, because that pain is everything. Like it's like you're driving a station wagon full of like 1,000 years of your bullshit in the back, and you hit the brakes and it all comes and like decapitates you. Like that's what it feels
so
like.
Brutal, which is the time that I decided to get a female sponsor.
Right.
I had no idea how
that's the change, right? That's like, okay, something has to, like, you were done with that. You needed something new.
I mean, I was such a mess and I saw this woman and I was instantly attracted to her. I think I was speaking at a meeting and she was there and she ended up sharing. And I was like, oh, she looks good and she's not crazy. Awesome. You know what I mean?
Right.
You don't always get both, right?
Yeah.
And I called her and I asked her to sponsor me. And now she jokes. She's still my sponsor to this day. Now she jokes that she ended that call. My energy was so off at that time.
Right.
That she said she hung up the phone with me and she was vibrating over the phone.
You used to, like, during those days, I've never met anyone who literally, like, I was like, is she sober? You talked so fast and your body, like you moved so quickly. Like
truly uncomfortable in my skin. Most possible.
I was like, I don't know. You were like busy doing nothing.
Yep.
Like you just,
100%.
every cell in your body was going in a different direction.
Running away from me.
Yeah. And
yes, totally.
It just looked so uncomfortable. And
it was for like a year.
Yeah.
I couldn't really sleep. And so anyway, I found this woman and she's like, okay, I'll sponsor you, but this is how we're going to do it. We're going to go through the book. We're going to go through the steps and we're going to go line by line in the book. And I would show up at her house every Saturday afternoon. And because I was so busy judging myself and feeling so insecure and so just like a fish out of water.
Yeah.
Every single moment of the day.
Yeah.
I was uncomfortable all the time, right? And she's this woman who has 30, now I think she's she'll kill me if I don't, like 32, 33 years of sobriety, who, 20-something years of sobriety, who's like completely comfortable in her skin because she continues to work a program. She continues to go to meetings. She continues to, work with other people. So she's good. She doesn't need anything from me, like
right.
I'm there, uncomfortable, just crawling out of my skin. And I remember maybe a month or a few months into it, I blurted out at her house, I'm so uncomfortable right now. Because in my brain, I'm like, oh no, we're not best friends already. It's like, she doesn't want to be my best friend. I have literally nothing to offer.
You've never had a relationship like that.
No, where you have to build it organically.
Right.
And she literally said that to me.
And she's the adult. Like, you're not used to adult. Like, someone like embodying what it truly means to be loving and an adult.
Well, that and to build a relationship over time.
Yeah.
Right? I was so used to like, oh, we have things in common. We're best friends. Like, she really had no interest in being my best friend. I'm very close to her now. And she's still now my best friend. She has friends.
Right?
Yeah. Like, so it just was a matter of like
special relationship.
Yes. And she said to me in that moment, she started laughing when I was like, oh, I'm freaking out. I'm so uncomfortable. she's like, give it time. We're building the relationship.
Yeah.
I was so used to this like out of thin air.
Yeah.
That isn't real, right?
Right.
It's not lasting. It's not built on anything like real. But I did. I went and I had to tell her some really shameful things, that I thought for sure some of the things that I had done, she had been on the receiving end of in her life, right? That were like things that like completely changed her life. And I had to be like, I'm actively engaging in this thing right now. And all she said to me was, to get self-esteem, we do esteemable acts. That's all she said. I mean, it like broke my brain. And I had heard it a million times before that. But like, she could have been like, ew, gross, get out of my house.
Yeah.
People that did something, whatever. She could have brought herself into it and she chose not to. And that's all she had to say for me to be like, I'm out of this situation that I'm in that is making me feel awful,
Yep.
And I'm ashamed of it. And I've had so many experiences like that. And so I went through the steps then, and I've gone through them numerous times, and I just finished going through them. I do want to touch on, I had another bottom in sobriety, right? So after that, my life was getting bigger and I was traveling all the time and just burnt out after a couple of years and I didn't really have roots anymore. Yeah. Luckily I had great friends that, I was able to leave and come back to like, some normalcy a little bit, but definitely starting to kind of spin out again. And I made a decision in that time on a trip to, I don't know, Africa or Europe or something, that I needed to come back and like reroot myself.
Yeah.
Because I need consistency. Yeah. I do. I'm one of those people that just loses it. I can travel the world and I can be in a different city every day, but I need to be able to come home for brief periods and feel like I have a routine. Yeah. Because otherwise I'm just all over the place and, such a creature of habit. And I decided that I was going to, stop taking on events all over the place and stop doing this and really root myself here. And I was going to start this new business. Right. And it was a business that my mother was in. So, I, told myself like, oh, you got it. Right. From driving around after school and like kind of sometimes paying attention, you'll do great. And I didn't have it, and I put my time and my savings and my energy and every single thing I had into, and stopped bringing in a paycheck to do this. And my brain was like, oh, because my last experiences were like things grew organically and they grew quickly and things were good. And I was like, oh, it'll just happen right away. And, this business will build, somewhere in me was like, it's going to take 5 years to build this business. But, the instant gratification thought won out. And I had, it'll be 5 years and it's finally getting there. But I will say I've never been until about last October, for maybe 2 years before that, I've never been in that much fear in my entire life. And you heard about it. Yeah. You saw me.
Well, and it was, a lot of it was financial fear that you'd never experienced
and that's
before.
The thing is it was a new kind of fear.
Yeah.
As much as I've had, so much stuff happen in sobriety, that was one thing I never had to deal with.
Yeah.
It was always, the amount of energy and effort I put in, I was getting back equal or greater.
Right.
Without fail.
Right.
And usually it was greater, not equal. And it was in those few years, the amount of whatever I was putting in, I was getting less than back,
Right.
And it was costing me a lot of money. And, I don't think anyone does well with uncertainty but it was affecting me in areas of my life that had nothing to do with finances. Yeah. It had nothing to do with job stuff. But I was like reverting in on myself. I've always, I think, been that person that, what you just spoke to, those years of me being uncomfortable. So I'm just go, right? That was always my, kind of fight or flight response was like, just push through it and just move 3 times as fast and it'll be okay. And this was paralyzing. Yeah. I was not reacting to it the same way.
Well, and I think your relationship with money, right? Like your relationship with money was a big thing that didn't get addressed.
And I didn't even know it was there.
Right. And like, I think that is so, all of us have a relationship with money, right? An emotional relationship with money, except maybe your dad, but I'm sure he does too. Yes with his legal pad. Right. And when when you feel like you're, when you grow up and money is used as power and
which it was 100%.
Custody and, mom traded you for a car and, it's all about that for a long time, but it's also always there. Right. Right. And so I think that dealing with how it relates, because like for me, money affects all of my relationships, particularly my romantic relationships, but it affects all of my relationships.
I had no idea.
And there isn't enough money in the world for me to feel safe. I had to learn that. I had to learn that.
We had this conversation years ago, I remember.
At one point I had plenty of money not to be scared. And I have never been more afraid of financial, and I was like, oh, this is not that. Because for me, and I think maybe you relate to this, was because a dollar bill, right? Like it had a consistent currency. It was constant.
Right.
I knew what you could purchase. Right. I knew it was always going to be the same.
Right.
And so you couldn't rely on people, right? People were changing at all times. You didn't know if they were going to show up, but you always knew that money could buy you a shelter, right? Or could buy you food, or could buy. So it was like, it was safe. Like by definition, it was not changing. Right. And so it felt safer. Right. Like I can rely, if I have $20, I can purchase or whatever. If I have $1,000, I can go and stay somewhere for a couple nights. If I have you, I have no idea what I'm going to get.
You could leave. You could
leave. I don't know what you're going to, I don't know if you're going to contribute. Like,
well, that goes back to the control thing. Right.
But this total fear. And so that was another thing. LW was like, money is just energy.
Yep. I remember that.
And I was like, you're insane. Right. Like, that's an insane thought. Right. You're an insane human. Like, this is insane.
But you're also right.
But weirdly. Yeah, but that's still stuck in my head. Money is just energy. Right. And I was like, he's like, it comes and it goes. It comes and it goes. And I was like, no, it literally, like, I had put my faith in that. Even though it wasn't, it's not like I had a lot of it, but it didn't matter. Like I put my faith in that, and turning that into like, you have to do enough work that you're willing to have relationships you put your faith in.
100%. I mean, I can bring it to present right now. I was on the phone. I'm really good at overall knowing, as far as the higher power goes. Like I grew up not religious, but we were taken to church, and I think it was maybe for the custody battle, the purpose of the custody battle, to make one parent look better than the other, and more stable and more. So I always had a resentment, but there was always something, even at that time, knowing that everything happens for a reason, and I didn't know what it was. I didn't know, so there wasn't this like coming in here. I didn't have that issue. I knew, but as an idea, as a theory, that's how I felt. But in my day to day, I mean. The most stubborn, so I can tell people like, oh, well, it's God's will. You know what I mean? You should just be doing God's will, and don't get in the way, and then turn around and like do something terrible in my own life that was very much 100% my will. Right.
It's fear. It's
100%.
The
lack of control.
So much lack of control. Oh my God.
So terrifying.
And then I think back to like wanting to use as if I was in control then, but that's like the irony.
Completely.
So your relation, there were a couple things that happened in your sobriety with your mom as that relationship deteriorated, that caused you to like really be the adult. Right. And we talked a little bit about her mental illness in the beginning. How did that situation play out with her?
She really started to deteriorate after I got sober the last time. Like truly, to the point where I didn't talk to her for 5 years. And that was a decision that I made, not alone, but I needed it. I wasn't going to stay sober. Because it was incredibly volatile, and it was incredibly blaming, and it was incredible. I needed a break from it. I had spent my entire life with it. And the more sober I got, the more I realized that, it was a sickness. I think for a long time made it about me, why she's so mean to me. And it's like, okay, no, there's a sickness, but that doesn't mean that I can engage in it. It doesn't mean that it's healthy for me right now to engage in it. I don't have the tools to engage with her, so I'm just not going to do it. And so I had to take a step back, and my family was very supportive because they knew, they experienced it.
Well, and she was hallucinating. Yeah. Like
towards the end, she was fully having crazy hallucinations, and not to say she's a crazy person, but I'm saying they were so elaborate, the
sober hallucinations, right? Or not?
I don't know. She was diagnosed with cancer at one point, and earlier, and I think I'm jumping around a little bit, but at some point in my early sobriety, she was diagnosed with cancer, and she's on a lot of medicine.
Okay.
And
so
medication, pain pills. I don't know what she was taking. I don't know.
Well, she at one point,
but something broke in her. Something snapped in her from that experience. I think.
And something. She at one point, she was like not in her house. She was living in her car.
Yeah. Electively, yeah.
Electively living in her car, and you
With my little sister.
and you took London.
Yeah, so I ended up taking my little sister. I didn't take her. My mom took my sister's dad to court, who really hadn't been. Early on, he was apart, and then he wasn't. And my mom was like, you need to pick one. You need to pick to be away. And then all of a sudden, he wanted to be back. And I don't say that lightly. I mean, but there was a point where my mom tried to take him to court, and it ended up backfiring on her, and she lost custody of my sister. And I was I had to go to court and testify, right? Probably the hardest day of my life. Maybe the hardest day came after when I had to go meet my sister at the police station and tell her she wasn't going back to my mom.
And she was upset about that?
Yes, because she was told that her father was just a bad guy, which is not the case. I need to make that very clear.
Yeah.
And she had to go live in a house with her dad, who she barely knew and was told horrible things about, and her stepmom, who is an angel sent from heaven, this woman. And I think that was the reason that my sister was even didn't try and run away then.
Yeah.
And she had to go through it. I mean, it was the most heartbreaking day of my life, where I know that she was resentful at me because I was the face of being pulled away. But so this little girl, who is now not little anymore, she'll be 18 this year, is probably more adjusted than anyone I know, who's lived a lifetime, right? Where the realizing my mom was sick happened really quick for her, right?
Oh,
and realizing,
okay, so she really,
it took a while, it took a minute, and to come around to her dad, and now they all have a great relationship. And my mom, the craziest thing that has happened in my sobriety, my mom was the kind of narcissist, and I'm putting that label on it. I'm not a doctor. That it was never her fault. Nothing was ever her fault, to the point where, if you put a gun to my head, I would say there's never going to be a time where she will admit that she has had any part in anything that has happened to her, to us, any of it. And one day I got a call from my uncle that she said, I know I'm sick. I want to get help, right? And that was a couple years ago, and she stuck to it, right? And our relationship is constantly changing. And I still didn't talk to her for
because
another year.
The last couple of years, you've had some semblance of a relationship.
Yes. And, when I first saw her, she had like Parkinson's symptoms. She couldn't talk. She couldn't form words or sentences. And I think for me, our relationship was very volatile, and it was very loud, and it was very, all of that. I think that was the only way that I could see her.
Interesting, like to lose the speech.
Yeah, like she physically couldn't fight me back, you know?
Right.
And then over time, with working with doctors and all of that, like she's gotten her speech back, but a lot of the anger has dissipated, and she's in Al-Anon now. She's in, which she had gone to before, but I think it was always as a weapon before. Mm-hmm. Like, when are you going to give me my amends? When are you, Mm-hmm. She is in an eating, I think she's also, in OA and for eating disorder stuff. She is heavily in therapy. She's really she's medicated and she's really making the effort to try and I've gotten amends from her. And for us, it was a very 5-minute thing, because who wants to go through a whole lifetime of stuff? We both know what happened, and we've left it at that right now. And if it needs to come out more, we'll talk about it more. And, those are the things. I have a relationship with my father today.
Well, and you didn't talk to your dad for a long time.
No, I had to stop talking to my dad. I was really hurt. I felt very judged all the time.
So he and his wife ended up having children.
Yes, 2 of them.
2 children.
2 children. And
they moved to Orange County. And
from Seattle, they moved to Orange County. And
they built a real family life.
Yes.
Structured.
Very structured, yes. And, once I got sober again, I think, there was no trust there on my dad's end. I don't blame him.
Yeah.
But I kept wanting this relationship out of thin air, kind of, because I had pushed him away when I was a teenager. And he wasn't about it, And so we stopped talking for the first few years of my sobriety. And then we started talking again. But I still felt judgment, and I felt and then it all kind of came to a head, and I stopped talking to him for a few years, because I just felt like it didn't feel safe for me.
Yeah.
Not that he did anything, but, I also have to respect that he is the parent of 2 other children and I'm not a parent, and I don't get to judge how he parents. and what he sees. And it's all out of love, right?
Yeah.
But he too had no coping skills
Right.
and no
I mean,
communication
these are all
skills.
hard decisions.
He can make, business decisions, communicate that. But when it's emotional stuff, none of us had tools. And so I had to back off for a few years. And he started calling. And I remember telling my therapist, like, oh, he called again. But I'm not calling him back. And she said, no. And my therapist was sober, is sober like 40 something years. And she said, that's actually really punishing behavior to not, in my head, I'm like, I'm not engaging, so I'm not making it worse. So it's fine.
Yeah.
But she's like, no, that's punishing. He's making an effort. That doesn't mean you have to be super, try and, forge this like super intense, relationship right now, but you're being punishing by not, you're holding the power, right? And you're liking it. And so anyway, I ended up sitting him down at one point. I wasn't talking to my mom at the time. And I said, listen, I talked to him like an adult, he was so used to me. Anytime he would say anything, I'd just start crying, like this overly emotional.
Yeah.
Who wants to deal with that all the time? No one, right? And I said, listen, the older I get, the more I want a family. Like I'm respectful of the way you live your life. It might not be what I'm doing, but you're my parent, and I would really like to make a go at this, and we have, and it's been years. And we talk about business stuff now. I can call him about that. And I heard somebody speak at a meeting recently that they never felt like they had anything to relate to their parent about, and that the parent didn't, relate to them. So they in turn tried to see what the parent was interested in, right? So this girl was talking about her dad liked tennis and golf. So they would like watch tennis together, and like slowly but surely they would, would build this
relationship.
Yeah. And now they go on like a golf tournament every year together, and like they have a real relationship, right? So like my dad, we talked about business. My dad likes to surf, so we talk about that. We talk about my little sisters, and one of the biggest gifts I will ever have gotten in sobriety. I was told when I was a teenager, like hopefully you can just have a glass of wine with. There was no education on that side of the family about alcoholism and drug addiction. It was more like, why won't you just get your shit together, like, come on, you're embarrassing yourself and you're really being a pain. But I got a call a couple of years ago that the oldest of my dad's daughters was being a teenager and kind of dabbling in things. And it seemed like it was kind of going a little too far. And they called me and asked me for help. Wow. And to me, forget the cash and prizes, forget the financial security, forget all of that. Like I was not someone that they would ever go to for advice.
Right.
That's like the understatement of the century.
Yeah, putting it lightly.
And I got to, she didn't want to go to college. She didn't want to do this. She was like going to go run. And I got to help them through it. And she's at a really incredible college in New York. And has the partying has really settled down, to a normal amount, right? Because she's a teenager and that's what they do. And they asked me, do you think we should put her in rehab? And my answer was, no, I don't. I think that will be a place where she learns.
Yeah.
Things.
She'll come out with a PhD.
In heroin, and no one needs that. So I don't know. I can't say enough. I guess one of the last things I can say is like speaking to the last few years, the really, really brutal last few years, as scary as it was. And still can be, I'm not like, I'm a human. I have a pulse, so I'm going to worry about something, right? There has been the only change is there has been this feeling, this like, almost like a warmth in my stomach. Like, how that warmth you would get when you would drink and that it would go down and like warm your stomach.
Yeah.
That same kind of feeling that everything's going to be okay.
Yeah.
And then it will work out. It never works out in the time frame I wanted to work out in.
No.
Like that would be lovely.
No.
But that has been my experience. And that doesn't mean that I don't fight against it. I was talking to a girlfriend the other day who was having some relationship issues or something, or she was struggling with something. I don't know if they were having an issue, but she was having a hard time with something. And she talked to somebody and they're basically like, you're great. So it doesn't matter what the other person is doing. Right. And the message she took from that was maybe this relationship I'm in doesn't work out. But that just means that, that the universe, my higher power, God, has a bigger plan for me, and I need to stop fighting against that. And I'm listening to the story and, me going through my own personal stuff right now. I'm literally like, that's an amazing message. I'm like, for you, that's an amazing message.
Right.
Literally in my head, I heard it like, oh, that works so, like that does, there's no way that can apply to me right now.
Right,
my situation is different, it's unique. And then later that night, I think, or the next morning, it hit me. I'm like, no, not that special. 100% that applies to me. And the second that I can remind myself, like, that I will strangle a situation to death. It is my way or no way at all. And you need to do it at the time I want you to do it. And you need to figure it all out when and how and why I need you to figure it all out. As long as all that happens, it's fine. Once people start like, exercising their own will, forget about it.
Yep.
And it's just not my business to do that. It's not my place to do that. And it's been a couple days since that happened. And I've had like this whole new, just trusting the process.
It's so hard.
It's by far the hardest thing.
It's so hard. And you stay long enough, you stay clean and sober long enough, and you remember, right? Your brain, like you make it habitual to like, oh yeah. And it's habitual to go to meetings, habitual to call people, habitual, like you create these habits that are kind of like your safeguards, but you have to like, I have to bump up against them to remember them. Like it's not like,
so crazy.
Like it's not like I just remember them because yesterday I did it. Like that's just, I need to
be like paralyzed by pain.
Oh, 100%.
In order to
100%.
I just think it's so funny after all these years that I was like, oh yeah, that works for you. That's a great message for you.
Yeah.
Like that was the inner dialogue. And then I'm like, wait a second, what?
Yeah.
I'm going through a similar thing she's talking about. Why in the world would that not apply to me?
Because this idea, there's a couple of reasons, right? Because the universe has a plan for you sounds insane.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, totally.
Like what?
My scientific mind doesn't really appreciate that.
I'm sorry. You're like, no, it doesn't, right? Or whatever. And then like also like, okay, if that's true, like I'd like to see this plan. Like there's a lot of questions that come with that.
Completely.
And so that's part of why it's like, wow, that sounds like really nice, but like obviously I don't believe that.
For you.
Yeah. And then
that's great for you.
I think what really changes over time is like the situations that you had with the guy who you paid back, and like you get enough experiences and you live through enough things working out that you start to believe it because there's evidence of it. And that's like when people are like, well, I don't believe in the God thing. I don't And it's like, cool. You don't have to
stick around for a little bit. Yeah, let it happen to you.
The evidence will pile up that things are going to be okay. And I always think back to like, when has it not been okay? When has it not turned out okay? What situation? Like, it's always somehow turned out okay.
Not always looks the way I want it to look or think it should look. And most of the time it doesn't.
Yeah.
It's when I hold on to that like idea of what I think things need to look like. And I shortchange myself every time, right?
Yep.
I think that, I have girls that I sponsor and women that I sponsor, and like watching them go through, relationship stuff, work stuff. I'm like,
so
do this.
Easy
and then
to see it too.
But you know what the worst part is? They do it. They're listening to me. And then I'm not doing it myself.
Oh, I know.
I called myself out the other day to a sponsee. I was like, I'm telling you to do all these things and I'm not doing them. So here's where I start doing it. It just doesn't make any sense. And I'm also seeing the things I'm telling you to do work.
Right. Which is
so
like,
why wouldn't I?
Because there's this resistance, like there's this inner resistance. Like
this time it's going to be different.
I have like, well, I was diagnosed with oppositional defiance disorder and like ODD when I was a teenager, which I think is so hysterical.
Yeah, and very fitting.
Yeah, and my dad always goes ODD, but it's like I just have to fight against it just on principle, and then I'll do it. Like I just can't.
But the pain of the fighting at this time in my life.
I fight for much shorter.
Yeah, because it's too painful. We're just too aware.
I
don't have the tolerance.
I don't have any tolerance for pain anymore.
Nope.
I'm like a small baby, and pain comes and I'm like, someone help me get out of my pain.
The problem with the difference between being a small baby and us is like we're adults and no one feels bad for us.
Not at all. And we're like,
so annoying.
I have to get up and go to work and pay bills. And it's like, these are the hardest things in my life. You put an emergency in my life. You put like a massive
I can fix 10 emergencies in an hour.
Oh, I am Johnny on the spot. I got emergencies down like you. You give me like
I'm glowing.
Yeah,
I'm in my element.
Yeah. I'm so in my element. Like I like any ambulance. I'm like, I'm ready to go.
Yep.
What do you need?
Yeah.
And then like a day, like a normal day.
The post office.
Oh, just like
I still want to
an extra insurance phone call.
No.
Like filing tax. Yeah. Like calling. Like I like fall apart.
I'll put things off for months.
Oh, but to the point.
Yeah.
I mean. I can't tell you, and this is going on record, I can't tell you how many times I have paid the late fee, which is significant.
Every time. To me, the late fee is just part of the fee.
The late fee
is part of it.
On my car registration, where it goes up like
I had to pay $1,500.
Oh my God. Yes. Okay. So
a couple months ago.
I literally was like, what is wrong? It's up there. And I'm like, I can't. I look at it, pass it, can't do. Like, I have had to train myself, but that's the thing about being an alcoholic, like that I don't see with other people quite to the degree,
right.
Which is like, it's the normal life living that is impossible for us.
It's too much.
It's like,
I wish I could be here 12 and a half years later being like, well, it gets easier.
Yeah,
I don't know about that. I mean, I'm not intoxicated, but I still, it's funny, those things that I put off, it's like I'm addicted to the anxiety of putting them off. Like that, what that anxiety does
well, I
to
tell
me.
myself it's going to be 4 hours, then I don't have time. Like
when it's 4 minutes.
For 100% 4 minutes.
You don't even have to talk to a living
No,
person.
it's like a robot 4 minutes. Yeah. It's like, it's not even talking to someone. They're just like, hey, pay it.
Yeah.
But no, I mean,
You can scan your credit card. You literally don't even have to input anything.
Yeah, exactly. Just do what we tell you.
It's so crazy.
But yeah, I mean, that is what
this is a very expensive lifestyle. I'm coming to learn.
Yeah, it's very,
like, where'd all the money go?
Yeah,
oh, yeah.
To the late fees.
Yeah, literally.
When I lived in LA, when I did my budget, I literally budgeted in parking tickets, and I put them as a charitable charitable contribution to the city.
That's amazing.
Because I was like, I 100% get at least 2 parking tickets a month.
Yeah.
So that's just, and I had a garage, so I didn't need to pay extra. So this was like, I was like, okay, so this is my version of like a garage fee. Just like, I couldn't figure out the signs. Yeah, I think, it's like it's you grow or you go. Like it's
100%.
It's really that simple.
Well, and the longer, I don't want to speak for you, but I feel like you will agree with this. The longer I stay sober, the more opportunities I have for grow or go. You know what I mean? They're just closer together. Right? And I just might, like I
really would like to slow down on the opportunities.
My tolerance, and I'm an asshole. Sorry for the language. Like when I'm not taking care of myself, I'm not a nice person.
Right.
I'm just, my default is like, and I, can put a smile on it. Make it look good, but it's not nice.
Yeah.
It's not nice. And I'm relentless when I want to be. I'm sure you've heard that word before. Mm-hmm. I know your husband.
Mm-hmm. No, your husband.
We're the Ashleys for a reason.
Yeah, exactly. Relentless is a good one.
But
which has served us in other areas of our lives. But when we're not taking care of ourselves, it's not that
back out.
The relentless doesn't go away. Right. It's just directed. Yeah. And it's either going to be directed in a positive way, or it's going to be directed to find every fault of yours and let you know about it on a regular basis.
1,000,000%. It's so awful.
It's just like down to the microscopic. Yeah. What role has therapy? You talked about therapy. You've been in therapy, all of sobriety?
No. So what I didn't mention before was, when I was a teenager going to therapy, I had this therapist, and that's the time when like boys come into play and like, all this weird stuff, and you're going through puberty and everything's awful. And I had a therapist that I started to finally open up to, and she ended up turning around and telling my family everything that was said, so that for court purposes. It kind of broke me. Like I already had trust issues, and it took me like years to build up to this woman.
Right, because she had to.
And immediately, she had to, but I think there was more to it than that. She didn't have to. I think there was extra incentive for her to overshare.
You think they paid her money?
Yeah. And so, for somebody who doesn't have any trust to begin with, it was like, and I was like, I'm out. Therapy-wise, like that's just a way to like have things thrown in my face. And so it took me until my mom was diagnosed with cancer again. I mean, obviously I went through to treatment and all of that, but like to actively seek it out. Yes, to seek it out. It took I was in a relationship at the time, and I think I found out my mom was diagnosed, and obviously everything that comes with, which is we have a terrible relationship. There's so many feelings that I kind of shut down like a zombie. And I was in this relationship with this poor guy who finally, like 6 months later, was like, you got to do something. Like I'm done dating a ghost, and which was valid. And I went to go see this therapist, who was LW's therapist, who just helped me so much. Yeah, he did. And I saw him for a few years, and then I ended up again getting a woman therapist, and she saved me. She's like, I was able to be completely honest, and and she was sober as well. So like there was that aspect that she understood. And I stopped going a few years ago. not for any reason other than it felt like an okay time to like, I feel like therapy is that thing that I'll go to forever. It'll just come in spurts, in waves. Like if there's not something I'm actively working on, I'm lucky to have through therapy and through working the steps and through all that, I have a lot of awareness about childhood stuff. And that's not to say I know everything, but like I know enough to be able to get through the day. So I kind of took a break and, unfortunately she's really sick right now and I don't know what's going to happen with that. I actually want to go see her this week. I guess it might be close to the end, but so, everyone can benefit from therapy. Yeah. And have I been thinking about maybe going back and going to therapy again? Yeah. So it's just a matter of finding a great fit, I'm a huge supporter of it. I'm a huge supporter of it like on my own, and I'm a huge supporter of it in a relationship situation.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, it has changed. I've been in a relationship where I went to therapy to learn to communicate and effectively did that, right? For me, I am like I need results kind of person, right? I think a lot of us are. I need to know that I'm going to get, when I do X, I want Y to happen. Yeah. And I need to know that's going to happen. And so when I have a history of that happening.
You have the evidence.
Right. It's the evidence of believing that this can then again happen again. Yeah. So I've had great experiences with it. It's really just a matter of how little I want to lie to myself anymore. Yeah. Right? Yeah. I'm tired. Like, I'm just exhausted.
Totally. It's exhausting.
So I was like, life in itself is exhausting. So like to kind of carry on this, it's just easier. I'll say this. For years and years and then years into sobriety, it took me, I don't know, I want to say almost 10 years, but probably maybe less than that, to realize that I never fully committed myself to the program and worked all 12 steps because there was some deep-seated fear in me that what if I do this and it doesn't work for me? What if I'm unique? Because this is the last house on the block. I don't know where else to go. So what if I do this and I'm the person it doesn't work for? Right. And again, that was never a conscious thought. And I didn't have the thought until after I'd worked the steps numerous times. And it did in fact work for me. But it was always this like, I'm going to fail, so I don't want to try kind of thing, know? And I can't live like that anymore, It's just, why not try it? And that doesn't mean I'm not stubborn here and there. Like that doesn't mean that I'm like, I don't try and like come over the top as much as I, from time to time. But overall, it's like, no, I'm not that special. And thank God for that, because then then I can do what everyone else is doing to feel better, And
it's like this now there's a recipe and it produces and it works and and if you do it, you will get those results. And the nice thing about it for me is that I don't have to like figure out how it's gonna work. Right. That's the piece for me, because I'm always trying to figure out how it's gonna work.
Too tired for that at this point.
And now I'm like, okay.
I'm okay to know, not know.
Whatever. I'll do the crazy, the thing that sounds woo-woo or crazy. I don't care.
I'm going to say this is a sobriety's podcast, but last year when I was really going through it, financially freaking out, my friend was like, do this 40-day meditation. And without even, before I'd be like, yeah, cute, haha. Yeah. Cool, bye. She gave me the book, and the next morning I started it. Oh, yeah. And I did it every day for 40 days. And I don't know if it's because of that or the timing was supposed to shift, but things shifted. I'm not as willing to argue it anymore.
Totally.
Because I don't have the energy. And I also know that when I do finally do the thing, it usually yields results. Right. So why not just try it?
I certainly don't lose anything. That's kind of, I'm 100%. Certainly not losing anything.
At the very least, I'm meditating for 15 minutes a day.
Right.
That is not going to hurt anyone around me. You know what I mean?
Right.
There's not going to take away from any situation.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming. I love you very much. And I'm so grateful that you're sober and you shared all that. And I know that's good. This story is going to help a lot of people.
Well, thank you. It's nice. People getting honest with me is what made me feel like I can open up and be honest. So if it even helps a single person, I'm so happy.
It will.
Thank you for listening to me ramble.
Thank you. This podcast is sponsored by Lion Rock Recovery. Lion Rock provides online substance abuse counseling where clients can get help from the privacy of their own home. They are accredited by the Joint Commission, and sessions are private, affordable, and user-friendly. Call their free helpline at 800-258-6550 or visit www.lionrockrecovery.com for more information.